Hey guys, Garfum here, and I'm finally back. I had been super busy the last few weeks, which is why I haven't been releasing any videos, but now I finally have some time, and today we're going to be talking about augmenting items again. And this isn't going to be a guide. If you don't know what augmenting items is already, you should go check out this video so you know what we're talking about. Now, this video is going to be discussing whether or not augmenting items is a good game design, essentially. This is in response to a video I watched by GuKill where he basically came to the conclusion that augmenting items was an interesting idea, but has been implemented in such a way that it sort of harms the game, and that he concludes is a bad feature to the game. So today I'm going to be responding to some of the key points that GuKill brought up in his video. And just to preface beforehand, I'm not bashing on GuKill or anything. He made a very good video on it and he brings up some really good points, and I'm just giving my response to those points. And these are also concerns I've seen elsewhere in the community. So here are the 4 main points I'll be responding to. First, augmenting items is bad because it discourages people from playing on multiple characters. Secondly, for sort of the same reason, it discourages people from switching their builds on their main characters. Thirdly, it encourages botting. And lastly, that it increases the power gap between people that can spend a little amount of time on Diablo and people that can spend a great amount of time on Diablo. So firstly, the fact that it discourages people from playing on multiple characters. The reasoning behind this is because once you level up your legendary gems and you augment all your gear on your first character or on your main character, those gems are consumed, and if you want to do it again on another character, you have to re-level all those gems all over again, and that the time needed to do that would be too big for people to want to play on multiple characters, or to, more importantly, push on multiple characters, because pushing for leaderboards, it will be required that you have augmented gear, basically. And I kind of agree with this rationale. If the time needed to re-level those gems for another character ends up being so large that a huge part of the community is discouraged from playing on multiple characters, I would agree that discouraging people from playing on multiple characters would be a bad thing. The part where I disagree, though, is the fact that they think it's going to be this huge amount of time, so no one's going to want to re-level those gems on other characters. I think that in the bigger scope of the season, that it's actually not going to be that huge of amount of time to re-level those gems, and that many people will have the ability to level those gems to play on another character. But that's sort of something you'll have to see during the season over the long course of things, how people really feel about re-leveling those gems again. I personally believe it's not going to take enough time to discourage people from playing on other classes. So moving on to the next point, where people will be reluctant to switch their builds even playing within the same class, for the same reasoning, because if you're going to switch builds, this usually requires switching an entire set out, so you'll have to re-level gems for a good portion, if not all of your gears, so like 10 plus items are going to be re-augmented. And if this sort of time commitment to re-augment those items are going to stop people from switching out their gear and therefore switching builds, it brings up the argument that people will not want to be innovative. There's not going to be as much creativity in the game. Like, people won't, if they're not switching their gear, they're not switching their builds, which means they're not going to be testing out new things, which sort of kills build diversity, innovation, creativity within the community for discovering these new builds. Now, I think this argument that augmenting items is going to kill innovation and creativity is completely wrong. It's actually kind of, the argument itself is total bullshit. Just think about how the meta currently works, or how this community is currently playing Diablo. You have, let's say, 5% of the community coming up with the best builds. They're the ones testing it and figuring out, hey, this is the best build. Then you have 90% of the community that looks up their build and says, hey, this is the best build, I'm going to copy it. Then you have the other 5%. These are the people that are trying to test out their own builds, but for whatever reason they don't have the resources, the time to fully test out their builds, and for whatever reason it's never discovered that it's a good build or whatever. So currently there's not a lot of innovation going on in the community if you look at it. There's 5% of people, it's a small percent of people that keep coming up with these builds, and it's usually the same people season after season. For example, for Demon Hunters, Woody Joe is a very prominent Demon Hunter in the community that has been coming up with Demon Hunter builds forever. I don't know. Since I've been looking up Demon Hunter builds, I've seen his name again and again, and I now know him as a very good Demon Hunter. And he has been defining the meta for a long time, and he'll come up with a build. So let's say at the beginning of this season, he came out with Lightning Natalia's, and everybody copied that build. While everybody was using that build, he kept on testing out other builds while people kept pushing with Lightning Natalia's. And he recently posted on Reddit a list of his failed secret builds, and there was one of them that seemed to him quite promising, that involved thorns that probably, I'm gonna say, nobody else ever tested. I'm fairly confident saying that nobody else ever tested thorns on a Demon Hunter besides him, or at least to the extent that he did. Maybe somebody tried it as a joke, but he made a build around it that was actually pushing up into this high 60s and 70s. And you can see that he's the one that's coming out with these builds season after season for Demon Hunters. So the innovation and creativity is there, and it's going to stay there even with augmenting items. It's just the innovation and creativity is already coming from such a small source in the community that they know what they're doing. These people that keep coming up with the builds will be able to test it again next season, even with augmenting. So this also brings up the point that I want to expand on, that secret builds will be easier to keep secret next season, because the people that are innovative and come up with these builds are still going to have the resources and time and tools that they need to test these builds. They're just going to be doing it in a slightly different way than they're used to. So next season, the way I see many of these people testing out the builds is they're going to do it without augmented gear on. So they'll take the best build of Season 4 and they want to test it against something they have an idea for Season 5. They'll take the Season 4 build, test it without augmented gear, then they'll take the Season 5 build and test it with unaugmented gear. Whichever one's better is the better build. And they'll do that for all the builds and just keep comparing until they see which build's the best unaugmented. And the reason this will be easy for them to keep secret is the best build that they find in their testings won't show up on the leaderboards even if they push it as high as it can go, because a crappy augmented build can push higher than a really good build that isn't augmented. So the really good secret build won't show up on the leaderboards because there's going to be just mediocre builds up there on the leaderboards with augmented gear. And back to the original point again, like I said, it's not going to kill innovation or creativity. People can still test these things, that it's still available, there's still ways to do it. And in my opinion, it's actually going to make people think a bit more this season. They're going to have to consider whether or not they want to augment their gear. It's going to add that extra level of thinking that goes into the game. They can't just be told what to do, because they'll be sitting there and they'll look up a build, they'll be thinking, okay, is it worth it for me to augment this gear right now, or should I wait and see if a new build comes up? And, hopefully some people will be like, or maybe I should test out my own builds and see what I like and come up with my own new build, something like that. But the innovation and creativity is still going to be there, and it'll actually hopefully make more people think rather than people just copying, pasting, and then doing it that way. Okay, now that I've finally talked that last point to death, let's move on to the next point of why augmenting items would be a bad feature, which is that it will encourage more people to begin botting. And the reason why is because it's another grinding aspect to the game. You have to collect all these gems. I mean, getting the gems isn't going to be the cumbersome part, it's leveling them up that's going to take forever. And this would obviously be something that could be eased by the help of a bot doing it, like getting all of them from 1 to 50 for you or something like that. And the way I see it is that this argument being brought up could be brought up in almost any new feature they put in, so why bring it up? There's, from my viewpoint, only 3 solutions, and those being, one, the least reliable is that Blizzard bans them, and even if they ban botters, they might miss some or whatever, making it unreliable. And the other 2 both being based around caps, either daily caps of how many resources, how many glyphs, how many bounties, whatever you can do in a day. So it limits you to what you can do in a day, similar to some Eastern titles I've experienced a little bit, such as Dungeon Fighter Online. It goes off of a fatigue system or whatever. You can only do so many dungeons in a day and then you're done on that character or whatever. And I think they do the same thing in WoW. There's only certain raids that you can do once a week. I might totally be wrong, but some sort of cap like that. Or finally, the last kind of cap would be capping people's paragons off at a certain point, and then along with that, since they added in augmenting, probably capping off the gem level that you can augment into your gear. So instead of it being 50 as the required, and then you can go over, make 50 exactly be what it has to be, or 50 and over, and you only get the benefit of up to a level 50 gem. And those are the only solutions I see to botting. Now, in conclusion, yeah, I think botting's bad, but I don't think the fact that this new feature, that it can be manipulated by botters to help people who are using bots, should reflect on the design of this new augmenting feature. I think it sort of reflects badly upon how the company's choosing to handle botting as a whole, since you can bot in every single aspect. You can bot bounties, you can bot greater rifts, you can bot normal rifts, you can bot for keys, hellfire mats, legendaries. You can bot for everything. It's not just a problem with augmenting items. It does add another thing that bots can use, but that's an entirely different thing that needs to be resolved in the bigger picture. And finally, moving on to the last point of why augmenting items might be a bad feature is that it might create a bigger power gap disparity between people with less time to play and people that have a whole lot of time to play. So basically the fact that people with a lot of time to play can grind paragons and paragons and paragons and get this huge power difference over someone with similar gear, just maybe a little bit worse gear, but with a lot less paragons. That guy with the more paragons has a big power advantage over them, and the argument is, now with this augmenting feature, those people with that huge paragon advantage are going to get an even bigger advantage with augmenting. And this one's kind of the easiest for me to respond to because I can just throw some math at it for you. Now, before I bore you to death with a bunch of numbers, let me tell you that this is actually going to be beneficial for the guy that has less time to play, as it's going to actually bring him closer to the power level of the guy that spends a lot more time on Diablo than him. So, for example, this season, someone with 1500 Paragon versus someone with 800 Paragon. The guy with 1500 Paragon is going to have 4000 main stat, and the guy with 800 is going to have 500 main stat. A difference of 3500 main stat, which means the guy with 1500 Paragon is going to have 8 times more main stat. Now next season, we'll take the same Paragon levels, and the guy with more time gets to level 80 gems, and the guy with less time gets to level 50 gems. The guy with 1500 Paragon and level 80 gems is going to have 9200 main stat, versus the guy with 800 Paragon and level 50 gems is going to have 3750 main stat, Now this is only a difference of 2.453 times more main stat, which is less than 8 times more, which is closing that gap. Now you say, okay, what if the guy had level 100 gems or something? Like, he spends a lot of time, he can get really high gems. Well, even if he has level 100 gems, he's still only getting 2.8 times more main stat, which is a lot less percent more than they were getting above you last season. So it's actually helping the guy with less hours. So to wrap things up, my thoughts on augmenting items, besides the botting problem and possibly being a problem with not being able to play on multiple characters, I think the augmenting feature is going to be a fun new feature, and I look forward to using it because it's going to lower that parity between people with less and more time, and it's going to hopefully make people think about their build choice more before they fully commit to it. And I look forward to using it. So let me know in the comments what you think of the augmenting feature. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate a like. And if you want to see more Diablo guides and videos, make sure to subscribe. That's all for now, guys, and have an awesome day.